Hello and welcome along to this latest episode of Cali Corner. It's just going to start today's episode with a bit of public service announcement. It's just to say that I've actually set up a Patreon now, patreon.com/Cali Corner. A lot of you will be familiar with Patreon. I'm effectively looking to crowdsource the production costs behind producing the podcast here. So if you can afford it and you enjoy what I'm doing here, then please do consider heading over there. It's been set up at the sort of default value, which is $5, because I didn't know how to change it, to be honest, but that might change in the future. But as I say, if you would be interested in helping with the production costs, then please do head over to patreon.com Cali Corner, where you can sign up. I'm also looking to use that as like a vehicle to maybe see who people would be interested in coming on as a guest, and maybe setting the agenda for some of the conversation. And when I've got guests confirmed, I'm happy to sort of say this is who's coming on, and you can suggest and put questions to them as well through that forum. So that's the idea, that's the pitch. If you'd be interested, then please do head along to patreon.com/Cali Corner, as I say. And thanks for all the support so far. I really do appreciate it.
It's the way the world's going as well. The corporate world is in charge, and they manipulate the governments. They've got control of governments. They're the ones who are running the show. Starmer's just a puppet. He's a ridiculous puppet, but he's just a puppet for certain people from a certain country that's bombing other people right now. A lot of these people are involved in that world, so they have different interests. Their interests are not, I'm going to get into government to improve everybody's life. That's the last thing on their minds. I thought the Tories were ridiculous until he came. I've never liked the Tories. An abomination like Boris Johnson turns up and becomes the leader, you think things are definitely getting bad if you're elected these kind of people. And then they come up with this guy from the Labour Party. The Labour Party hasn't been the Labour Party for many years. The Labour Party is a Tory party. Number two, the Labour Party will probably be on its knees by the end of this 4 or 5 years. It's just a sign that things have got to change for the whole UK as well. For me, the catalyst would have been Scottish independence. That would have been the catalyst for change.
Hello, Alan Knight. Welcome along to Cali Corner. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this, mate.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Yeah. So, obviously, I had seen you had directed a documentary, London Calling. It just sort of popped up on my feed, and then I sort of contacted you off the back of that. So that's probably going to take up the bulk of our discussion here. But given the fact that you directed that, I'm interested in what got you started and being involved in sort of.
Okay. Well, I've got a film background anyway. I've been I was working in the film industry in London for a while, and up in Scotland as well. For quite a long time, been in business for quite a long time, off and on, and I've had various sort of roles within the industry. I started off as an editor, worked as an editor for a long time, which was actually a really good position to be in, because you learned how to put the movies together, and you realise that a lot of people didn't know how to do that. So it's, in terms of being a director in future, it's extremely useful. That was kind of interesting also, because you sometimes used to work on really bad projects, but you'd learn a lot from working on that bad project.
Are you going to name some of these, Alan?
Well, they're not even big movies. They're movies I can't even remember.
Even the plot, maybe Confessions of a Windy Cleaner and stuff like that. Is that what you're talking about?
No. This was. I was working on some feature films, few TV dramas, over a long period of time. Working on occasional pop promo, documentaries, small pieces for television. There was all kinds of stuff going on. Did stuff for the BBC and things like that.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. Yeah. The editing side of it, as I say, was a good grounding in the wider aspect of film production, and I learned a lot through that. So, but then I had ideas to make my own films, but and I started writing scripts and things like that. But I was down in London. It was really difficult to get money for them, for projects, and it takes a long time to be a decent writer. I don't know if my scripts were ever really up to scratch. Maybe one or two of them were, but it was such a hard problem. Even if you know people, then you might be able to get the money, but it's quite difficult, So I kept writing anyway, and I kept editing. And then I started making documentaries. I made a documentary in early 2000, I think it was. Was it then? 1999, something like that, about Bosnians in London after the Yugoslav wars broke out. There was like you might call it a lyrical, poetic sort of film essay which I eventually sold to RT ZDF television in France and Germany. So got my money back. So can't complain, So I've been doing all that, and I suppose when I came back to Scotland to try to work in Scotland and try to develop projects here, and I found that was very difficult because there's even less money up here. So had to find another way to get by. But in terms of when London Calling came up, I'd already been doing footage for Newsnet Scotland, which I think you know of. In its old days, that was when it was really effective.
Yeah.
And we were doing interviews and things like that and pieces for them. So and also we did. That's right. With George Ponsonby, we concocted this idea. I can't remember how it came about. We concocted this idea to make these animation films. I don't know if you've seen them, called Dougie Doug.
I don't. Maybe not on Twitter back in the day, but
Yeah,
it's not ringing a bell just now.
We decided we'll do this for a bit of humour for the campaign, for the referendum campaign. So we came up with this idea, and we went ahead, got a little bit of money, and then got Brian Cox involved, the Scottish actor. He did the voiceovers for Dougie. Dougie was a little dog, a little Scottish terrier, the little black ones. And so I think we got Paul Kavanagh to write one or two of the scripts, or we threw in our own ideas as well. So we made some of those, and they went really well. People really liked them, and the BBC even talked about them. I think they were a bit concerned about them.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, they actually showed them on Panorama one night after the referendum.
Was it sort of like satirical?
Yeah, it was partly satirical, partly it was kind of a mixture of serious, politics and the lies that was going on, plus a bit of schoolboy humour as well. Threw that in, so they went down really well. So anyway, the referendum happened and we lost. So then George started to write his book, about the BBC, and once that was done. That was maybe 9 months later, maybe longer. We talked about it one night after I'd seen what he'd done in the book, and I said, okay, then maybe we could do a documentary on this. And this is what we did. We raised the money through, crowdfunding, etc. It took a while, and but then once we got the money coming in, then I started to develop the production, got people involved, people like Craig Murray and Paul Kavanagh, Mark McNaught, and just started shooting the interviews, and then I had to spend a long time, months in fact, editing the whole thing, using BBC footage like you saw, and that took a long time.
I know, I can imagine. Yeah. There's loads to get in there, so I think we'll start with, what was the inspiration, I suppose, behind the London Calling documentary?
The inspiration was basically the book. The book was the inspiration because, it was laid bare how bad it actually was, the bias and the collusion between Labour and BBC and the rest of the UK. And so we thought, hey, this would be a good idea to do a spin-off and make a movie that talks about the same thing. But we'll change the subject matter a little bit, and then bring in different people, because it wouldn't have worked otherwise, from the book. The book is a book, and, it's a different beast. So, and
let's park that for a bit. It's a different beast. What do you mean by that? Are you thinking that maybe you have the ability to reach a wider audience with the documentary as opposed to the book?
Yeah, you do, actually. Yeah, you do. Because people don't read so much these days as they used to in the past. People are used to media, getting information through video and audio as well. So that would be another way of getting it across. Maybe it could have helped the book as well, But I don't know what the sales were on the book. I have no idea. But yeah, that was the inspiration for it. But I remember it was showing it I remember showing it to George, and he says, I've no idea what you're doing, so I'm going to be interested in see how's this going to work, And I gave him a rough cut copy, and he came back and said, "Oh, that's great." I said, "Well, it's not finished yet, but it's on the way." So he said, "Oh, right, so you did it this way, you did it, how you sequenced it and all the rest of it." I thought, okay, just keep going. So,
and what about, like, you mentioned the sequencing there, and that's part of, like, that's talked about in the book as well, right? Because I actually read it in sort of preparation for this. So, like, what was, when you read the book, did you already have sort of ideas about how you wanted to start it? Like, how did you decide on the sequencing? Like, what were the most important, like, stories that you wanted to sort of document, I suppose?
Let's see. Well, what I did at the start was when I spoke to Paul and Craig and the other lady. We talked about what they'd experienced and what they wanted to discuss, and then they gave me a couple of stories about situations or things that happened, what they'd observed as well. And I thought, okay, well, we'll talk about that stuff. And at the same time, then I put in different sequences about other things that happened that would work. It would be working better with some visuals. So you lay the visuals over what's happening sometimes. So that's the way I went about it. And what I had no script. I didn't really need a script. I had it in my head what I would probably likely do. And I thought, okay, we've got a whole range of reasons why we think there was bias. So I thought, okay, I'll start. I remember starting with Craig Murray's talking about Luxembourg, because it was kind of funny, Luxembourg says no. Which, Luxembourg is a very small country, so I don't know. Again, that was a manipulation,
Can we talk about that maybe? Like, because I think we spoke briefly about this earlier. I think it would be interesting for sort of people to know. So, like, how this sort of subtle, or maybe it wasn't so subtle, how all these stories were harvested by the BBC.
Well, BBC, I think they seemed to go after anything that they thought they could exploit. I mean, they were coming up with all kinds of nonsense, and then they would just repeat them all the time, keep it going. As Craig said, it was like, and John said it was like Nazi propaganda. He says this was in that style where you repeat it again and again, you keep it going, you keep it flowing. So it gets into people saying, they go, oh, well, it must be real then. And of course, it wasn't. But that's, propaganda is like that, But they did have more subtle elements to their propaganda than the sort of like in-your-face stuff.
Propaganda is a big word for this early to be starting. But just to talk about that, though, let's delve into it, because the BBC, they're supposed to be impartial, right? They're not supposed to be...
They're supposed to be, yeah.
I think it's part of it's on their website, actually. I've got it written down somewhere, but they're supposed to be impartial, and not supposed to sort of set what the political agenda is. But the stories that you're talking about there about Luxembourg says no, and all these other people who were involved, maybe members of the European Union, were contacted directly by the BBC to elicit what would be their sort of response on a sort of Scottish independence referendum. And I think a lot of the time they'd sort of said, look, that's for Scotland to decide, we won't take a view on this. But I think they also said that if the UK government would like to negotiate with us as part of this referendum, then they need to make that case to us. But the UK government never did that, I don't think. But I don't know if the BBC ever published that as part of their sort of stories. They never highlighted that a lot, doesn't it seem?
No. I mean, the other method, of course, is exclusion. Bias by excluding. You don't put certain information that's important or showing the other side of the story. The other one would be panels on television, where there would be one SNP member and then 3-4 unionists. That's the way they played it all down the line. So they were always outnumbered, and it wasn't a vote. They didn't get a wider view. There was a less focus and on what the SNP or what independence would mean for Scotland. So that's they have their methods, which are a variety, like the one I mentioned before about the story in the movie about the Croatian minister and they were implying that he was saying it's going to be really difficult. It's going to be really difficult, and he wasn't really talking about Scotland. He was talking about Croatia, you know. And they were implying that he was talking about Scotland, so saying to people, no, it's not really a good idea. It's not a good idea. It's going to be really hard, you know. It was relentless. It was unremitting. It never stopped.
Yeah, I think there was another one in the book actually. It was like the Irish foreign minister had been contacted for a comment, and then she gave her comments to the BBC, and then they put out a piece where I think she was. They tried to make it look like she was implying that it would be difficult for Scotland to join the EU.
They put a spin on it.
Yeah, and then she had to subsequently. I think you guys at Newsnet contacted her, and she put out a rebuttal and said that this has been manipulated and distorted. This is not actually what I said. And then I think Nicola Sturgeon...
I have a vague recollection of that, actually.
Nicola Sturgeon also put out a piece on, I think it was the SNP's official website, to say with the Irish Foreign Minister sort of comments as well. So it was a real theme of the referendum campaign.
It was. I mean, they went as far as during the... towards the end of before the referendum came up. They even talked to, what's his name? David Cameron talked to Obama, President Obama, and told him, you know, please do something against Scottish independence. And I suppose he was reluctant, but he did it anyway.
I think, not just Obama, there was overtures to, this was pre-Ukraine, so they were trying to get Vladimir Putin to come out with a comment before his name was in the map as well.
Yeah. I can't remember did Putin say anything? I can't remember.
I think he remained impartial. But there were certainly attempts to try and coerce him into...
Yeah. I mean, they're using everything. I mean, I can't remember all this stuff. It's a long time ago now. I realise it's 10 years, which is depressing in a way. You know, I'm not feeling very good about it. I was really upset about the fact we didn't get independence, because I think it would have changed everything, you know. It's like Irving Welsh said, he said if we get independence in 2014, he said the energy that's going to generate from that is just going to unleash. And I think he was right, but it was all suppressed. And it's been like that for a long time, you know.
Yeah, no, it's sad, but obviously you did direct the film, so was there anything else sort of significant for the film that you think that maybe people will have forgotten about, that's worth sort of reminding them of how the subtle bias plays itself out effectively? I think from the sequencing was mentioned as part of John's research as well, if you can touch on that maybe.
On the sequencing of
the stories. So specifically, I think John was like a professor at the University of West of Scotland, and I think he was saying that it would always the trend was that BBC Scotland, specifically reporting Scotland, they would sort of present a story with the yes side being on the back foot, then it would be a positive story for the yes side, but then it would finish on a sort of negative for the yes side and a positive for the sort of Better Together campaign.
They would choose, if they had a studio discussion, they'd choose who would come in, who was, and they'd probably plan it beforehand, what they're going to do. And the whole plan was to degrade the quality of the SNP's argument. And, they did it, I guess they did it quite effectively because, it was, the bias was pretty intense. It was, and I mean, a lot of it was just lies, just blatant lies. I mean, I can't even remember all the lies now. It was just floods of, it was floods of lies. Again, and then they used their more subtle methods it would probably depend on what story they were picking up, and how they would present it, and what they were trying to do. I mean, as I say, I'm trying to remember now because Craig knew, because he was following the BBC, and then he realised, he said, when he was watching, the start of the whole referendum thing, and he thought he was watching it very carefully, and he's an ex-diplomat, he knows a lot of stuff, and he was pretty taken aback, actually. He says on the level of it, and he was right. He was right.
Aye, I've got the quote here actually. So it says on the BBC website, I just lifted this last week. We're impartial and independent. Our mission is to act in the public interest, serving all audiences through the provision of impartial, high-quality output and services which inform, educate and entertain. BBC Scotland is a mixed genre of television that appeals and reflects the diversity of Scotland. Would you agree with that statement?
Not really. Not really. I mean, it's a poor. The quality of it is poor anyway. I was told. Don't know if this is true. Probably was, but supposedly people were, when BBC were interviewing journalists, I think for BBC Scotland and BBC, there was a shift. They decided that they would find out their political biases, i.e. Tory, right wing, and then that was in favour of those journalists. They bring a lot of people in who had those types of views and who were unionist in their views. So they would get employed by BBC, and then they could subtly present their biases without saying that they're being biased.
Well, I think the film or the book touched on that as well. It was the sort of links between the BBC and the Scottish Labour Party, effectively.
There was a lot of links, yeah. I mean, it's like a kind of a, the revolving doors. Some of them go into media, and some of them kind of go into politics, and they all know each other, and they're all unionists, and they wanted desperately to stop independence. Why I don't understand the mentality of these people, but because they're maybe just Brit state mentality. We're more powerful if we're all together, and it's not really, because Scotland is just there to be exploited like Wales and Ireland. That's what they've done. It's like the remains of their empire, because I think that's really that's got a lot to do with it from the top. The crown, the elites, the structure of Britain. They control everything, and they decide, like I said, the media, the newspapers, it's all controlled from London, So, to allow that other view, which was based a lot on reality, had to be extinguished, because, if they realised, not, for example, paying attention to other small countries, it was like, you're too wee, the usual, you're too wee and you're too stupid, so it's derogatory, and you think too wee, like, what you mean, like Luxembourg? It's really rich, if you want to see it from that point of view. Ireland, same population as us. Norway's, incredibly well-off country. Scandinavian countries are doing okay. They've got small populations. I mean, that argument just doesn't hold. It doesn't exist, but a lot of people just either, as you say, some people just don't want to hear it. Some people are afraid, they're worried because they peddle fear. The unionists peddled fear, and a lot of people bought it. That's why if we'd had another 10%, it would have been a different story. If we got another 10-20%, but they started from a low level, and they really made an impact. And they were panicking in the last week. The UK government were panicking in the last week. I know that. And then they put out this vow. You're going to be the most powerful, parliament, within a state in the world. Well, that didn't really materialise, did it?
It's interesting you bring up the vow, because the Daily Record editor at the time is now the CEO of the SNP, which I find quite an interesting development, because I think that would have been significant, in my opinion, for the people who were on the fence to be told, it's going to be feudalism, you're going to have all the powers that you need, even though that wasn't something that was on the ballot paper, and we should have been in a period where you weren't able to promise new things. For that to go out on Scotland's biggest selling newspaper a couple of days before the referendum was huge.
Yeah. Well, I remember at the time, desperation of the No campaign, because there was a poll that said we're 2% ahead, and from what I heard there was just panic stations in Downing Street, and and that's why I think that there were some kind of shenanigans going on during the actual vote. I'll leave it at that.
I was hoping you were going to open up there.
Well, it's difficult to remember all the details because it's such a long time ago now, and I try not to think about it too much now because of my disappointments.
No, I understand. There's maybe some things I can remind you of, because I've obviously read the book sort of more recent than you. But one of the most fascinating stories in the book, I thought, was there was this like business think tank group or whatever, CBI. So it's basically like a big cabal, like an organisations of different businesses who are part of this club, and then this club try and like influence like policy effectively. So they speak to government and they try and inform the members of like upcoming fiscal changes and policy changes that's going to be happening in government. So they kept coming out with statements that were like negative for the sort of Yes campaign. They kept putting
Was that the economic forecasts and all that? Was that what it was?
It was more like, we're getting businesses are saying they're not investing in Scotland, and businesses are going to move away from Scotland, stuff like that. Yeah. And then the chairman of this CBI, I forget what it stands for, but some British Institute or whatever, he had said that they wanted to actually come out and be an official like affiliate of the Better Together campaign. But then a lot of the members of CBI were like, we've not been consulted on this. Like, what's going on here? Like, this is a disgrace. So they had to rescind their application to become like an official sort of part of Better Together, because obviously this is regulated. There's supposed to be rules of engagement here. So people who regulate this sort of stuff were sort of looking at them and saying, you're making all these public statements. It looks as though, you're maybe campaigning on behalf of the No campaign here. So anyway, they had to rescind their application to become part of Better Together. But at that point, the damage was done. So a lot of people who were members of CBI, such as STV and various universities, including the one that we're sitting in here just now, had to leave. They had to rescind their membership. And then it transpired that the BBC themselves were actually a member of CBI. So they suspended their membership.
Right. I'm beginning to remember that now, yeah. They had to suspend their membership, yeah.
But I don't know if they're still a member, but for an institution, I know it's called the British Broadcasting Corporation, so the clue's kind of in the name there, but for that institution to claim that they're impartial and then to be a member of this club effectively, and be putting out stories which you're supposed to be impartial stories, it's really quite astounding, quite a major conflict of interest there, I think.
Well, for us, the BBC, they've always had a sort of a bias in that sense anyway, because, you look at the old, say, newsreels and, the way they talk about the rest of the world, their empire in the past, and also the way they talk about the royal family, which is, just like a complete whitewash of what they actually are. So it's no surprise, but it really did, it really went toxic during that time of the referendum, because there was a lot at stake, and it was being exposed. It was being exposed. A lot of people started to realise that, hey, we're being lied to. We're not getting a fair crack of the whip here. And that's why you started getting the demonstrations, because people started to talk, and they would examine the news and realise what was being left out, and how the fact that somebody from on the independent side didn't get a chance to promote their ideas. It was, as I say, it happened constantly, and CBI business really just exposes them for what they are, because the corporate world, the media, because the media is so distorted now. It's not really. It's like basically like a spokesperson for the government, the BBC now. And you're right, it was astonishing actually, the level of it. At the time you thought, they're just blatant, it was just blatant lies. Everybody knew it was blatant lies. And they didn't care. They didn't care, because all they cared about was making sure that we didn't get independence. because of the consequences for the UK. The UK would be no more. It wouldn't be this so-called, big, powerful state, which is not anyway anymore. But they still have they harbour those desires. And that's why, and again with the nuclear weapons, that was another, I think for me personally, it was another reason behind the scenes why they made sure that it didn't happen, that we didn't get that vote. I think there was manipulation, because the last thing they wanted to do was lose those nuclear weapons, because it just makes them look like a secondary, third-rate power, because that's the way they see it. Whereas we want independence with a 5 million population, England doesn't with a 45, 50 million population. What are they afraid of? It was like they were afraid. You thought, well, it shouldn't really be a problem for a nation that size with all the resources they have. A lot of smart people in it. Why would England not want to be England again, But again, there's a lot of people in England that probably think like that, but they're not in charge. So you could put it back to the people who are in charge. It's the corporate world, it's the elitists, Rupert Murdoch, people like that. The royal family, they say they've got no power, but they have a lot of power. And, that was the way it worked out. And I say they were scrambling around, coming up with all kinds of nonsense, just to have this daily diet of, lies on the TV. And after a while, I got, by the time I'd finished editing the film, I was really glad it was finished, because I was having to watch that every day. Watch a lot of that stuff. And it was quite sickening, actually. I felt quite sickened by the whole thing afterwards.
No, that's it. It's interesting. You mentioned the word lies there. I don't know if I would go as far as lies, because there's be good people that work at BBC as well. Just hard-working journalists. But I think the bosses
they don't have editorial control, though.
Yeah,
that's who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people at the top.
Aye, no, I know what you're saying, but is it more just manipulation, like propaganda, that sort of subtle?
Well, some of it is,
yeah,
but a lot of it wasn't. It really went. It went ballistic. It was quite an interesting experience from that point of view. So watching this television station that tells you that we're really even-handed. You think, well, I can't see that. I can't see you being even-handed here. No, I'm sorry.
Do you think some of it comes, you mentioned elitism and stuff like that earlier, do you think a lot of it comes down to just good old-fashioned snobbery?
Perhaps, yeah. These people, it's the way the world's going as well, the corporate world is in charge, and, they manipulate the governments. They've got control of governments, because they're the ones who are running the show, I think. And it's the same in the UK, You can think of it now, look, Starmer's just a puppet. He's a ridiculous puppet, but he's just a puppet for for certain people from, a certain country that's bombing other people right now. He is. A lot of these people are involved in that world, so they have different interests. Their interests are not, I'm going to get into government to improve everybody's life. That's the last thing on their minds, except unless you're rich or, got the right contacts.
Yeah, well, I think for Free Gear Keir, he's just in it for the suits, by the looks of things.
Well, I've never seen, I thought the Tories were ridiculous until he came. I've always never liked the Tories, and he had just an abomination like Boris Johnson turns up and becomes the leader. You think things are definitely getting bad if you're electing these kind of people, And then they come up with this guy from the Labour Party. The Labour Party hasn't been the Labour Party for many years. The Labour Party is a Tory party, number 2. And I remember talking to a few people, including Craig Murray, quite a few years ago actually, about the Labour Party, and he didn't have a good word to say about any of them. And in fact, he called them something that, I better not pronounce here.
You don't want to get his banned.
It really. It was. He just said, "Oh dear." He says, "It's not gonna be any better with them around." We knew that. And then, then they got into power after lying about, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then they turn around and say, no, we're not going to do that.
I think people need to examine that as well, though. Like, they got into power on the lowest, like, UK election turnout, I think, of since they've started taking the count.
Yep.
And also, obviously, down south reform took a lot of the Tory votes. So I think they've kind of got in through the back door. I think they got less votes than what they did when Corbyn was
Well,
here.
they've had their lowest rate of votes ever in the history, I think, of the Labour Party, I think, are pretty close to. And they won an enormous majority. Now, all that tells you is the system's busted. The system's wrong. And you've got this first past the post system, which, of course, the two main parties, they're quite happy about that because they can exploit it. And, they get a majority which they don't deserve. You're right, there's also a very low turnout. It's pretty low turnout. And, 33% of that turnout voted for them. Probably a lot of them voted just to get the Tories out. But from what I've heard, the stuff I've read recently, the Tory party will not be, the Labour Party will probably be on its knees by the end of this 4 or 5 years, whenever they're going to be in power, because he thinks that they're losing their popularity as well. It's just a sign that things have got to change. I mean, for the whole UK as well, But for me, that's the catalyst would have been Scottish independence. That would have been the catalyst for change. Because once Scotland's independent, they lose our resources, which they want, including the oil. And there's plenty of other, plenty of other resources here with a cash cow. And they wouldn't be a, world status, they think, would deplete. They'd be depleted. And they were absolutely determined to stop it at any costs, So I think that if Scotland was independent, then you would find that the elites would probably lose their potency. I mean, they would lose a lot of their power. If Wales became independent, if Northern Ireland rejoined to the Republic. Because this is a system that's been around for so long. It's been around for hundreds of years. While they had the empire, look, we're in a different age now, But they're desperately clinging to this idea, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the other things, we've talked about this for a while now, so maybe we'll move on to actual filmmaking and stuff after this.
Sure, yeah. I got how did I get into it? I went to photography school, years ago, and then, I did a bit of film there as well. And then, I started working. I went to London, and I was working in London. And then I got into film editing. I just got a job in that area. And I worked for TV stations and here and some of them in England as well. And then I worked on some movies too, with other people. So, because I was always interested in movies, but that's the kind of the sort of the big end, the large end of the industry. And I did that for quite a long time, actually. I mean, I edited all kinds of stuff, Started off as an assistant for a while, and then moved in, did a bit of sound editing on feature films, right? So you spent like a few months on that, working on the sound. The sound's really important on movies, certainly as these days. And that was interesting as well, because you came across some directors that weren't interested in sound at all, and some who were. And then you see how things worked, or how you could make something work, or get around a problem, that kind of thing, and how sound would really be a big bonus, I mean, I remember editing a comedy film once. Wasn't that funny, actually, but it was Eric Sykes, the old famous British comedian, Eric Sykes.
It'd be before my time. Was he in A Fish Called Wanda? No, am I making it up?
Don't think he was, actually. No. We worked really hard on actually trying to improve it. I remember, and in the post-production, We did a lot of sound work. I worked with these guys in London who did a lot of sound work as well. So just to get some comedy, to make the comedy work. So a lot of things just didn't work in this film. You know, it really didn't quite work out the way they wanted it to, you know. But you noticed how you use certain things, you think, well, actually, it's more acceptable now. We can, you know, what else can we come up with? So it's kind of fun sometimes you're trying to come up with ideas and you're in the studio and you're thinking, well, that might work. And then you try a few things. That's creative aspects of it. You know, I really enjoy that. So you found a lot about structuring films and what things worked, what didn't work, etc. So yeah, I worked on television stuff as well. I worked on short films. Worked on some short films.
Would there be any sort of big commercial hits you worked with, or any like big names that you can remember working with? What are you working on just now? I think you were telling us you get this Buffalo Bill project or something on the go.
I got a few projects. I've been off the scene for a little while because of mixture of the COVID thing didn't help. That was really messed everything up for me in terms of lost a lot of contacts, and I was ill for a little while as well. So, and I thought, okay, I'm getting older now. What am I going to do? Been thinking about getting into animation because animation is a really interesting area. And we made those animation films for Newsnet those years ago, and that was such a lot of fun. We really had a lot of fun doing that. I thought maybe I could get into this one of these days. So I'm trying to get in now, and it's taking a little while. But I've got a couple of projects.
How difficult is it to like produce animation stuff like that? Is it just a case of like doing the drawings and then like filming them and like how?
It depends what type of animation you do. There's a lot of different kinds of animation now because of the technology's changed, and you can do almost anything you want, you know. But these were quite simple. There's quite a low budget we had for that. We got an animator in to animate. We'd create the script.
Right.
We create the script, and then we create the shooting script. So, okay, what are we going to do here? What's going to happen visually? You know, and then I would go through it with Anya, the animator, who was really good, and then she would come back with a scene, and we say, okay, well that's good. How about add something here, take something away here. We need another shot, I think, etc. That might make it work better. So she would go back and so you go through that process, and then we and I got a friend to do some music for it. And then you would add the voiceover afterwards. You know, the narration from Brian Cox. So we'd go and record it in the studio.
How did you get Brian Cox?
I contacted his agent. We talked about it with George, and I thought, I don't know if we'll be able to get him, you know. But I told his agent, and she got in touch with him and says, yeah, he says, I'll do it, you know. So he did it.
Did you have to pay him for that? Or?
Yeah. Yeah, we did.
There's a big smile there. I don't know if you're going to give this information away.
Yeah, well, you know, it's his agent. You know, it's done through his agent. So
yeah, they
always want money anyway. It's their job, you know. But it was good fun. He did it really well, and then you just put it together, and then we'd look at it, and then say, okay, we're done.
And so, did you ever get to meet him, or was he helping you promote these cartoons and stuff?
No,
like
I
that?
met him a couple of times. Yeah, I met him a few times actually. But got him into the studio, talked to him about it. I mean, I was interested in talking to him anyway because he was in this series that I liked a long time ago called Deadwood.
Yeah, remember
which is
it?
Brilliant, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't finish it, which was really sad. And I said, why didn't they finish it? So he told me the story of what went on there, you know. Because he came in on the third series and they were going to do all this stuff in the fourth series, and then it got cancelled, you know. And these things happen, you know. It's just a shame. And I said, yeah, it was really outstanding. It was a really outstanding bit of work, you know. So he was a bit disappointed about that, you know. So yeah, and I met him once more. We had to do one more video. So I did that with him. But yeah, animation is fascinating. You know, as I get older, you know, there's a lot of running about in film when you're shooting and all that. You know, it's kind of get a bit tired of that. So I thought, okay, we can make films on the computer, you know. So I'm thinking about it, but I've got this project. I've got two other smaller projects. Well, maybe not so small, but there are a couple of. One's a documentary, which needs animation, There's another one which is a kind of a fictional type documentary. It's set in Germany. I'm going to hopefully make it in Germany if I can get the money. I'm applying for some money right now, which is kind of like a fiction story but done in documentary style, I presume, unless I might change it. It develops organically, this one, so who knows. The Buffalo Bill project has been hanging about for years. I've been trying to get that one off for years, but it's really big and expensive. But there's maybe an advantage in not getting it done straight away because the technology has really changed it, and the things I want to do with it, maybe we can do that now, you know, because it's a style of animation. It's what you call a hybrid. It's a documentary hybrid. It's about the story of Buffalo Bill and his Wild West show when they came to Scotland in 1892, 1891, 92, and 1904. And it's taken from a book which I got the rights to, and it really covers an amazing amount of detail about what actually happened during that time, because all the newspapers were writing about it. You know, it was like having a pop star coming, because Buffalo Bill was one of the most famous people in the world at the time, in the Wild West show. And it was all over. The first time they came to Glasgow, they just stayed in Glasgow for a few months in 1891, 1892, just off Duke Street. And they performed there. And there's all kinds of funny stories, you know, interesting stories and funny stories with the Indians, because the Indians were there as well. And, you know, they see them walking around Duke Street and their gear and, you know, the cowboys and, you know, and people were like just totally fascinated by these exotic people, you know.
Sounds interesting.
The show was really popular. The show went down really well. It was really a big success. And there's some lot of interesting little vignettes in the story that you can turn into animation. You know, so it's nearly all animation. I mean, there's the archive as well, but I might even turn that into animation. I don't know yet if I ever get it made. You know, so then they came back in 1904, and they went all over Scotland because the rail system had improved dramatically then. So they went to Stranraer, they went to Arbroath, Inverness, Aberdeen. You know. I think they went to Saltcoats. Yeah, they went to Saltcoats. They went to Kilmarnock.
And how big's this production? Like, how many people are in it?
Oh, the huge train full. Yeah, it was a huge train. I mean, there was hundreds of them. You know, buffalo. You know, you get them on the trains. The trains would come into the station
With the animals and stuff?
Yeah, well, the animals, the horses, and the buffalo, and
Must have been something quite back in the day, seeing like that.
it was. I mean, it must have been amazing. You know, that's why. You know, I think it's such a great project because, you know, I mean, 1891, for example, just around Glasgow, and you suddenly thought, what's that? The whole crew were kind of along with the horses and the buffalo, so making sure the buffalo don't get, you know, out of control. And they knew and people used to watch them, how they would come off a train and go to a town like Greenock, for example, where they could do, and then they'd unload. Everybody was watching how they'd unload everything, and they set the camp up in, you know, record time. So they really knew. It was like, you know, it was like an army. It was like having an army, really. You know, and they had this big, long train, you know. And in 1904, they went all over Scotland.
Wow, huh? Interesting.
Yeah, and did shows everywhere. But it was, from a kind of social point of view, it was interesting. It's an interesting story. That time, you know, British Empire, Buffalo Bill coming back from the New World to the Old World to show how they'd supposedly tamed the savages, you know, because that was the mental state at the time, you know. We've tamed the savages, the Indians, you know, and now we're creating this great new world in a new continent. And so you saw the racism of the time. You know, you would the way they would write in the newspapers sometimes was, on one level, was kind of racist. On the other level, when the Indians were in all these towns in Scotland, people were running up to them and like totally fascinated and talking to them and then getting on great with them. It was it was a really interesting interaction. Oh, one of them ended up in prison for a month. He ended up in Burleigh prison for a month. It was an incident that took place, although there's some doubts around exactly what happened. But supposedly one of the Indians got drunk in a pub because they would get they'd walk into pubs and stuff like that in Duke Street, and they'd get offered drinks, and the Indian custom is never to refuse an offer, a gift. So they would get drunk, and of course their bodies were not comfortable with alcohol, and they got out of control sometimes. The one he went back, this is Charging Thunder, that was the name of him, and he got back to the camp up off Duke Street, and he supposedly hit some with one of his Buffalo Bill sidekicks. Then they kind of arrested him and took him off to court the next day and said, okay, took him off to Duke Street Prison, which it doesn't exist now. Put him in there for a night, and took him to the High Court next day and said, naughty, month in prison. And so he spent a month in prison. And they've got all this stuff. They got it's a good scene. They take him there in the car, and they've got all the paperwork that they did when he was registered at the prison. Indian.
Probably thought it was a wind-up. What's your name? Charging Thunder.
Charging Thunder. Yeah, that was his name. So he was in prison for a month. He was very well behaved, and then he came out, and there were no problems after that. But I don't know if it was entirely his fault, but because it wasn't a good idea to give the Indians alcohol, But
that's just a Scottish culture for generations, it seems.
Yeah. But the Annie Oakley, the famous Annie Oakley, the sharpshooter, American sharpshooter, she was a real big name in America in those days as well. And she was fantastic with the gun. She was part of the show. So you have elements of the show, but it's not really about the show so much. It's about what happened. They went to, what happened when they went to Greenock, what happened when they went to Saltcoats. And I remember for Saltcoats, it was the weather was absolutely atrocious, one of those really terrible days, and it was just like the field was a mud bath, So, and there was a lot of other experiences as well. There was a big fire. There was nearly a big fire in Dundee. There was a fire in Dundee. That's right. Yeah, something happened. There was an accident, and they had to. All the guys that worked in the show had to run around and put this fire out. It was just an accidental thing. So there was all kinds of situations that were happening.
Madness, it sounds like. When you were saying that she was a sharpshooter, she wouldn't have been shooting live ammunition in the show, was she?
Oh yeah. They were shooting those what do they call those things? Forgotten now. They weren't shooting animals. They were shooting what are those clay pigeon type things?
Oh yeah.
Those kind of things. She was doing that. But they were also shooting at targets as well. And then, she would shoot with a mirror, shoot behind her. She was an amazing sharpshooter. She was amazing. She was legendary in the States. She was legendary. So, she was there in 1891, 1892. She learned to ride a bicycle in Glasgow as well. Also got her picture taken with her new tartan outfit in Glasgow, which we've got a picture of. We've got a really good picture of her for that. So there's some good pictures.
It sounds like an
so
interesting
it's a really nice project, but the animation is a huge job. It's 2 hours long. It's a huge job, and got to find a way of making it look like old movie film, to pretend it's like a documentary, But that's going to take a bit of work, I think, and I need to discuss it with some animators. But there's some new technology there that might work for it, But anyway, I'm just trying to find out if I've been trying for years to find a producer, and I haven't been able to find anybody yet and find some money. So,
well, you maybe Brian Cox has got that Succession money now, so
I'd have to get in touch with his agent again.
So you need to go direct. That's the thing.
Yeah. But no, movies have always been my thing. I'm a photographer as well. I had a book published, Pictures of Glasgow, but I've always been more into film, really. And I would like to continue if I can. But I still like to watch a lot of movies, and, even the best movies for me, you usually watch them 5 or 10 times, because you learn stuff. You think, oh, I didn't notice that before, And I was influenced a lot, I suppose, by some of the great filmmakers. I started by watching a lot of European films, in my early days. from the French Nouvelle Vague, they call it the New Wave of French films, Jean-Luc Godard and Francois Truffaut and all these guys that were making low budget, but, alternative movies. It was a kind of a new wave, as they still called it, a new wave of cinema, which wasn't like Hollywood, And then the German cinema as well. German cinema with Wim Wenders and Fassbinder and all these people who are making really, really good sort of art house movies, And then I got lucky at college. I managed to see all kinds of different, unusual films from different countries. One, like, obviously outside the States, which were low budget, but some of them were really innovative. So I realised that cinema could be a lot of things, and that's the cinema I was interested in. But it wasn't so easy doing that in the UK. There wasn't so many films around like that, And then I got into movies like David Lynch. I'm a big fan of David Lynch's movies. David Lynch. You don't know David Lynch?
No.
Oh, okay. You need to check him out. Yeah, that's interesting. I think he stopped making films now. There's the one that you might know, Elephant Man.
I've heard of the film. This is
it was one of his early ones.
Is this Dustin Hoffman that's in that? Or?
No, it's John Hurt plays the Elephant Man.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's quite old. Yeah, and he made Tune. Oh, that wasn't his best favorite. What about Blue Velvet?
No.
Blue Velvet? No. I recommend it. Dennis Hopper was in that one.
I like Dennis Hopper.
Really wild. I mean, the character in there is pretty wild. You got to watch that one.
I will. I've loved movies my whole life as well. Like, it's a real, especially.
You're in for a treat then with David Lynch. He's certainly different. He made a show called Twin Peaks.
Yeah, man. One of my mates absolutely loves. Reckons that's one of the best TV shows of all time.
He didn't direct them all. He directed some of them, but it was he and this guy Mark Frost sent those out. So, things like Coen Brothers, Martin Scorsese. I mean, these are all like great filmmakers.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of people I like. Stanley Kubrick, Godfather.
Yeah, legendary.
Yeah, I mean, The Godfather 1 and 2 are, I think, some of the best movies ever made for me. Yeah. My favourites.
Really long as well,
just totally. Every time it comes on the TV, you say, I've seen it before, and you just sit there and start watching it again. It really is a fantastic movie. I mean, there's been loads. I mean, I've seen loads of films. I need to try and remember all the ones I've seen that are some of the really outstanding pieces of work. It's difficult to make a good film. It's even if you've got a good script. If you haven't got a good script, it's probably not going to be a good film. But even films have got the potential, because so many things can go wrong. You get into all kinds of trouble or messed up problems with budgets, and so they start tearing pages out of the scripts and then ruining the story. Miscasting. I was on a film. I've worked on a feature film once where the main character was miscast. It was really a mistake, and it just destroyed the whole movie.
Yeah, not an easy thing to put together, I don't think.
It's not an easy thing to put together, and you're dealing with different types of people as well. People that sometimes got very big egos, and or they're just quite flaky. Well, actors are quite flaky, insecure, and then some people in the crew, more in the older days, I think, but like they have this hierarchy. So if you're an assistant, they treat you like a dog's body. That happened a lot in the business. Did you ever know a Scottish filmmaker called Bill Douglas?
No, I heard of him either, man.
He was a brilliant filmmaker. He was one of Scotland's best ever filmmakers. Bill Douglas, he made a trilogy. Just called the three films were My Childhood, My Ain Folk, and My Way Home. There were three black and white art house movies about his childhood and the life he had, which was absolutely horrendous. He lived in a village near Edinburgh as a kid, and this is a reconstruction of his life. I mean, they're absolutely brilliant movies with non-actors. I would definitely recommend those. You'll be able to see them online, or get the videos. I would recommend them. I mean, he's been well praised in the world for being a great filmmaker, because he died quite early as well. So he made another feature film about the Tall Puddle Martyrs as well after that. But yeah, I would recommend Bill. But if you can find Bill Douglas's 3 movies, really outstanding work.
I know that's some good recommendations for folk who'll start be listening anyway, definitely.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. Else, I know there's a lot of people. There's a lot of directors who are in a lot of movies.
Ken Loach's stuff, obviously.
Ken Loach's stuff,
quite topical.
Not everyone, but he's a very, very good filmmaker. He's got some style, and he's stuck to his guns all his years, and because he's another one that doesn't like what's happening right now. He got marginalised as well. He got marginalised by the government because he made films about Northern Ireland and saying there's a hidden agenda, and he got attacked by the Tories, which he did. But he knew that anyway. He says, that's good. I get attacked by them, that's excellent. Did my job.
No, quite right. What about, we've done just over an hour, Alan, what about your own stuff? If people want to watch London Calling or your documentary about the Bosnians in London stuff, you got a place where people can go and see that?
Yeah, you could go to Vimeo. I've got the documentaries. London Calling is on YouTube on London. If they just type in London Calling documentary, they'll find it. But if they go to Vimeo, probably get a slightly better quality copy. Right. Vimeo.com, Vimeo.com, and then they try and find me. I've got a few things on there, stuff that I've done in the past, few documentaries, or a lot of stuff I don't have up online, but there's enough there for people to see. They could see the Barris film, the film I made about the Barris. I think is that a clip? I can't remember if it's a clip or whether it's the whole movie. I think it is. But the Barris film went down well in the Barris, so I was pleased about that.
Well, if you can impress people there, then you're in good company, sort of there.
Yeah,
the market traders.
Yeah, we had screenings on it, and people really enjoyed it. Had a good laugh.
Did much come up about, I forget her name now, but the woman who founded the Barras basically and bought the Barrowlands? Was there many stories about her? Is it somebody Smith maybe? Or?
What's her name? Oh God. Yeah, I mean, we've got a clip of her at the beginning of the film.
Yeah, she's magic.
Yeah.
People should look up her. She's got a wonderful backstory.
Yeah. We got a funny clip of her at the beginning,
Good.
But it's had its heyday, I'm afraid. I remember we used to go down there and see all kinds of bizarre characters and really funny people. I mean, you just doubled up. I mean, some of the stuff they came out with.
Yeah.
People used to just go down there for that. They didn't buy anything. You just go down and see these guys perform, And it's just this hysterical. Why did they get this power? It's amazing. But it's a changed place now.
It's still there, though. They're still fighting the good fight, and you're starting to see there's like artists and stuff are starting to congregate round about there. Like,
that's good.
Probably a different type of. I wouldn't say that. I don't know. I don't want to be classist, but a lot of them might not be, hard in these tenders, but they're at least, trying to produce art and stuff, and they're drawn to that area. There's something about that area. That's where I drink and stuff. I love it, don't you?
Yeah, it's a good area. I really enjoy it. I took my girlfriend down there once, a couple of years ago, and she's American, but Chinese American, but this is an interesting place. I said, well, you did a few years ago. It's wild, all this stuff that was on sale as well. Man, or you could buy anything down there.
There's a spirit about people there. I remember when I first moved to Glasgow, there was obviously the flea market as well, but then the police were
they got rid of it.
And they want it, the police and the council and stuff. It's probably much the same with the barrows. There's probably a lot of people in society who would rather it wasn't there, but I think the traders have been there for generations and don't want to give up, and quite right.
That's right. Why shouldn't they want it there? Just because they want to gentrify the area. That's probably why. So they can sell their trendy things, whatever they are. But no, I mean that's the Barrows is unique. And like to remain that way, you know, if at all possible. But I mean, that's a sure, and things change in this world now so fast.
No, they're holding on to it. So I would definitely recommend folk check that out anyway.
Yeah. But I mean, if there's anything else, I don't know, we're going to get on to anything else. No,
Nah,
no
I think-
time for it now.
Well, we could, but we've done like an hour and 10 people.
Oh, an hour and 10. We done a, is that gone? Time goes by fast, yeah.
So I reckon we'll call it there. I really appreciate you coming in, Alan,
Okay.
and we'll stay in touch with you.
Right. Thank you very
Good
much.
man, thank you.